You know more about your body and you have the wisdom about your body that I'm never going to have that wisdom about you. So you become that, we become this, there's a partnership. And I think that should be the basis of every.
You're listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage. We're here to plant seeds on compassion to animals, your health, and the environment, and topics related to business that align with all three of those areas. Enjoy the show. Well, I am very, very excited today to be welcoming my guest, who is a woman on a mission. She's on a mission to transform lives from the inside out. Anu Simh is a board-certified functional health coach and the founder of 9 Arms of Wellness, where she specializes in helping busy women lose weight and maintain their results without the crash diets or quick fixes. Her secret? It all starts with the gut. With a science-backed plant-based approach, Anu helps her clients understand the powerful connection between the gut microbiome, metabolism, and mental clarity. Through her unique methodology, she not only has helped hundreds of women reach their goals, but she also has begun training other coaches in her proven system. If you've ever wondered why your gut might be missing the missing link in your health journey, or how a plant-based lifestyle can reset your body from the inside out, this conversation is for you. Welcome, Anu.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. It's just a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. It's great to have you here. And, you know, it's interesting because I was on your website. I went there and you have a series of questions that you pose to women especially. And we just had a guest who has been doing Weight Watchers for years, and she's just like convinced that's the only way to stay healthy, and she measures everything. And I'm like, what a way to live. That's pretty prohibitive. But if it works for her, that's great. But your questions are yo-yo dieting and weight regain. Do you lose weight only to gain it back, stuck in the endless cycle of temporary results? Stress eating, emotional eating, and mental fog. Is stress, anxiety, or emotional eating controlling your habits, leaving you mentally drained? Inflammation or digestive issues. Are you dealing with bloating, indigestion, inflammation that affects your daily comfort and health? Chronic fatigue, low energy, and afternoon crashes. Do you wake up feeling drained, rely on caffeine to get you through the day, and crash in the afternoon? So with that in mind, I want to, that's a lot to unpack there, but I'd love to find out.
No, these are all symptoms that my clients come to me with. So anything that I say on the website is based on my experience with clients. This is what they're always talking about. I am exhausted. I feel like I lose the weight and gain it back, and I'm frustrated. I have brain fog. I mean,
so now with your clients, because I want to definitely talk about your clients and what you do with clients, and I want to find out how you got involved in all this, but give me a profile of what you would say is kind of the common type client that you get. Is it an older woman, a younger woman, middle-aged? Is it an obese woman? You know, tell us about the kind of clients that you work with.
Sure. So my clients vary in, it's largely women. I do have men, but the men come because the women come in first, and then their spouses or children, they all come into the fold as well. But women generally from the ages of 35 and up, you know, are the ones who come seek the next step. You know, by the time they come to me, they're pretty frustrated with everything that they've been doing. The weight has come back. They are not living at their ideal weight. They're frustrated. They're fatigued, you know, and food becomes this huge issue. It's like, I don't know how to digest this. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Am I getting enough protein? So I just keep it very simple. And when a coach or a functional practitioner is trying to help a prospective client, the one thing that is very important, Kathleen, is to always keep the conversation client-led. And that's something that's very important to me, because every person's different. So the diet or lifestyle needs to be very bio-individual.
Right.
So what works for you may not work for me. So even within the constructs of, let's say, a plant-based diet or, or a Mediterranean diet or anything, there are so many things that become very individual that we need to respect that. So I always keep that in mind when I talk to my prospective client.
Well, and I'm glad you said a plant-based diet rather than a vegan diet, because that's where a lot of, misunderstandings happen, that people think being a vegan means that's the diet and that's the philosophy, the plant-based, but we'll get into all that. But I know that you were born and raised in India, am I correct?
Yes.
And you came over to the States when? How old were you?
I was in my late teens. Yeah.
Okay. And now you lived a relatively healthy life in India, and then you came here and you got involved in the standard American diet, the S.A.D diet. Tell us about how your health changed for the worse, and then when you realized that it was really what you were eating that had a lot to do with that.
It's funny, when you have your health and you're fine, you take that for granted, right? And that was me. And then I never even thought about it. I just really kind of bought into the American dream, like work, 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 and find convenience, And so I was constantly looking for convenient ways to feed myself. And until the day when it really dawned on me that it was the food that was actually acting like a slow poison within me, that I realized that, oh my gosh, I have traveled so far away, no pun intended, from what I was raised, how I was raised to eat. And we came from a South Indian family. We ate a lot of plant-rich, our thalis or our food plates are like tons of different veggies and beans and lentils. And all of these things were food that, it was food that I loved and enjoyed and digested. But then in my mid 40s, I hit perimenopause and everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
It was like all of a sudden I started feeling like, okay, what's happening? And something was happening behind the scenes and I wasn't paying attention. It wasn't like one day when I was perimenopause, I decided, okay, this is not working for me, something is off. There were probably signs all along that I chose to ignore or didn't pay attention. And we all do that unless everything comes crumbling down and you say, not another day of this pain. Until then, we just kind of tend to just not pay attention. And that was pretty much me as well. And I remember the time I had started having a lot of gut issues and I went from doctor to doctor trying to figure this out. So someone needs to tell me what's going on. I could eat all of these foods and I continued eating these foods at home. It wasn't like my food at home was bad or, it was pretty healthy. It's just that I ate out a lot. I did a lot of the fast foods, packaged meals and things like that, just for the convenience aspect of it. So the doctors couldn't help me. They didn't know. We're talking about a time when we didn't know about IBS or SIBO and things like that. And a lot of them asked me about my diet and they say, oh, it must be all the veggies that you're eating or the beans. So stop all that and start out on having more of a high protein diet, And I said, well, I can't do that. That's not me. That's not going to work for me. So that was really frustrating. And honestly, I don't blame the doctors. They just didn't know at the time. They didn't have the the science behind it or even labels at that point. So I had this really terrible experience where in San Diego, I went to a doctor and he was literally laughed at me. And he said, everything that you're complaining about, we go through too as doctors. It's nothing. In other words, suck it up, lady. It's not a big deal. So he completely not looked at my whole picture of being perimenopause. And when you're in perimenopause, the rules of the game completely change. Right. Your hormones are shifting, your estrogen tanks, your progesterone's also low, your cortisol is higher, you have children to take care of, work to do, all of that changes, your belly fat increases. I've always been this skinny girl, and all of a sudden I started seeing this belly fat. I thought, what? Where's this coming from? And so that cortisol aspect was ignored. And the fact that I wasn't digesting my food was a huge, huge problem for me. I couldn't, I felt so uncomfortable, in my skin and just not being able to um, eat comfortably and not knowing what the next minute was going to bring. Was it going to be more bloating? Am I going to be constipated from this? Am I going to have abdominal pain? That was not the way to live for me. And after this doctor's appointment, I went back to the car just sobbing and just feeling extremely hopeless. And at that time, I heard my grandfather's voice very clearly. He was a physicist, a Renaissance man, and he probably was the first person, Kathleen, who had told me that food is medicine. And I said, that's what's missing. I have stopped looking at food as a source of, health, a way to heal my body. And it is slowly, something is happening. So I said, I'm going to use my science background. I'm going to figure this out. I was 100% determined at that point to figure this thing out. So I went to, we're talking about a time when we didn't have internet and ChatGPT or things like that. So I had to go sit in the library at UCSD for hours researching. And that's when I discovered the microbiome. Mm-hmm. I fell in love with it. And I said, this is the missing piece.
Right.
There's something here that I haven't paid attention to. And that and the ensuing research that I did showed me that immigrants like me come with an incredibly diverse microbiome, and they lose it. Everything changes. Their microbial population switches because their diet switches. They actually did research on people from Thailand. When they moved here, they're all these skinny people. Right. And then within a couple of years, everything changes. They start gaining weight. They start having gut issues, things like that, because their microbial composition changes. And you have to wonder, why does that change?
Right.
And a big needle mover is diet. So
I definitely want to dig into the diet and the ultra processed foods, because you mentioned that in your book, and I did some research on you, and your book, by the way, Flourish from Within. I encourage everybody to get a copy, because you've got not only your story in there, you've also got just so much information about the gut and just everything we need to do to identify the problems and heal the problems. You've got recipes in there. You've got beautiful images in there. And it's like, wow, this is like, you get 10 books in one. But you talked about perimenopause, and I'd like you to define for the listener, because I remember when I first heard that, I had no clue, and doctors didn't tell me, what that was. And I remember when I was going through menopause, and this was probably, I'm going to say 15, 20 years ago when I started going through, and I was really in the thick of things. And I went to a doctor, a male doctor. I had just moved to the Eugene, Oregon area, so it had to be 2006. And went to a male doctor, was in the middle of just like a meltdown, and I needed help. I needed a doctor that could understand. And he goes, oh, basically like what you said, suck it up. That's just what women go through. And I cried, and he goes, oh, here you go. You're just like, this was a doctor. And I'm like, what? And so I left, and I called the insurance company. I said, okay, here's the deal. I will not go back to that doctor. I want a female doctor. I want somebody that understands what I'm going through. Got a phenomenal doctor who happens to be from India, and she was so empathetic. And, I think that's a big issue for a lot of women. But let's talk about perimenopause, menopause, and then postmenopause, because I'm in my 70s, and it's like I'm going through things right now that I'm like, I eat super healthy, I exercise all the time, but there's things happening that I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. and so as a functional coach, you probably have some answers, but can you give a definition for each one of those?
Yeah, and first of all, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I know exactly what that means. And luckily now that more and more doctors, thanks to social media, just the awareness is way better.
Right.
I don't hear it as much as our generation or what we went through, definitely. Perimenopauses can be anywhere from 30 to 45, 46. That's that time before you hit menopause. So that's the stage of life when your hormones start shifting slowly. Things start happening, your estrogen, your cycle shifts. You may start noticing. Some people notice it like right away. Some people, it just happens gradually when the cycle is erratic. They may have more heavier periods, things like that could be. And every person is different. Every woman deals with perimenopause very differently. I have had clients who actually have menopausal symptoms in the perimenopause state, even before they hit menopause. So, and at that time, really getting your hormones checked is a good idea. And a lot of people, when you go to the doctor, they may do just baseline testing, your thyroid and things like that. So, but it is in our best interest to ask for a baseline sex hormone test, like a Dutch test or something like that. And that's usually something a functional medicine doctor or coach will do, is go through a Dutch test, which kind of looks at your urine and saliva and looks at metabolites and how your hormones are, how you're faring as far as your hormones. What is your cortisol level? Like, let's say, for example, every morning you wake up and you're fatigued and you feel like, I don't even want to start the day. That could be low cortisol, because you need enough cortisol to start your day, get you moving. You don't want, it's a whole Goldilocks principle. You don't want too much or too little. And when you have that cortisol is also important. If you have more cortisol response late in the evening, at night, that's going to keep you awake. It's going to diminish that melatonin response in the body. So all these hormones play a huge role in our lives. And I think testing really helps us, awakens us to what is next. And so after perimenopause, you slowly go into menopause. Menopause is like 1 year without your cycle. And that's when you're officially in menopause. And postmenopause is life after that. And in Chinese medicine, for example, they call it the second spring. It's a time for wisdom, it's knowledge, and we're giving back to the younger generations. And I look at life as stages, and it's not about, we're aging. We just have to remember that the rules of the game have changed. Our hormonal shifts it's definitely happening whether you like it or not. Without the estrogen, our skin is getting a little bit more lax and we don't have the same youthfulness. But that's also a stage in life. So the best way to look at it is, how healthy can I be in this stage of my life? And that means hormonally, microbially, keeping a good, taking a good look at your muscle strength, your muscle mass. All of that is important because, Kathleen, a lot of women, I work with a lot of vegans as well, as plant-based. Many of them do it because they're of ethical reasons. They love animals, they love the planet, and they don't want to have that huge carbon footprint. But health is a different thing. Even if you're plant-based, you have to really understand that you need adequate protein to keep that muscle mass, especially when you hit menopause and postmenopause.
Absolutely.
And before we even move from this conversation, 100% you can do it on a plant-based diet. Have enough adequate protein.
Well, let's address that, because when I actually went plant-based in 2018, and initially it was for health. I would not call myself a vegan. Now I'm definitely a vegan. It's like I crossed an invisible line to realize, I am doing it for the animals too. And so that kind of leads me. But then I went on a different path where I said, well, I'm vegan and I wouldn't call myself plant-based. And then I started eating a lot of processed vegan food. And it's like, okay, I got to get to that balance. And so now I'm a plant-based vegan or a vegan plant-based, whatever. But initially it's like I wanted to get rid of inflammation. I was 64 at the time, and so I really was feeling the effects of ultra processed foods. I had lost both my parents, and so I was doing a lot of comfort eating and gained a whole bunch of weight. I was not going to the gym, and I'd been working out since I was 35, resistance training. And so
Mhm.
for a period, I stopped, and now I'm back at the gym lifting weights again. But with that whole thing about the plant-based eating and getting protein, that usually is the number one question people will ask. Well, how do you get your protein? So how can somebody on a plant-based 100% whole food plant-based diet, how can they get enough protein?
Well, first of all, there's such a misunderstanding of that plant protein is not as efficient or it
Hmm.
doesn't have all of the essential amino acids. Not true. Plant protein has all of the nine essential amino acids. And the whole idea is how do you mix all of your protein? Granted, some of the foods may not have all of the essential amino acids at the same level, but we're not talking about single nutrients. We're talking about eating a meal, which is very different. And that's how they usually test it in the lab. Like they have something called the PDCAAC score, which is a protein digestibility score.
Mm.
So a lot of the people on Instagram will say, oh, but plant protein is not as digestible as animal protein. And this is coming off this plant digestibility score that says that, but that's in a lab and it's a test with rats. And, I mean, we're not talking about a combined meal. So when you combine things, let's say you have quinoa, you have some edamame or tofu scramble with lots of veggies and broccoli and things like that, then you're definitely getting your protein. But getting that protein and eating very intentionally is important because you can be vegan and inflamed. You can be vegan and you could be flourishing. So the choice is ours. Yes, we care about animals, we care about the planet, but everything starts with caring for ourselves first and our health. And I 100% believe that that should be our first um, thought is
Right.
caring for ourselves is not being selfish. It is a starting point of flourishing. It's like when you're flourishing within yourself, inside of you, then you have the potential and the bandwidth to care for the planet or the animals. Because if you're feeling really sick and tired, everything is going to come crumbling down. So I 100% feel like flourishing begins in the gut. It begins inside of us. And when we are happy and our gut is happy and our microbes are happy, then we're ready to do more and really have like this, like an ikigai or, a goal in our lives. Like
Right.
why are we here? Why are we put on this earth? All of that makes more sense when we are healthy.
Well, I know that one of the questions you ask people when you start working with them is, what does flourishing mean to you?
Mhm.
And what are some of the answers that you've gotten from your clients, and how do you use that as a baseline to know
Yeah.
how to work with them?
Yeah. And everyone's different, Kathleen. And I've heard some women say flourishing is like, okay, I wake up in the morning, I have enough energy to go through my entire day. I don't want to be waking up tired.
Hmm.
Others have said to me, I'm at that stage where I really want to be there for my grandkids. I want to have enough energy for my grandchildren. Others have said, I want to be today, I am 60. I want to have the same energy and be able to do the things that I did when I was 40 or 50. And so that becomes like a health span, right? And once they get that, then the flourishing changes to more emotional flourishing or relationship flourishing and things like that. That can be an extension of flourishing within ourselves.
So,
And
in functional coaching that you do, tell me about the certification that you received, or the education you received on that, and how does that differ from traditional medicine? For the people listening, some don't know there's a difference. So, and I've been trying to find a functional medicine doctor locally, and it's amazing when the insurance company says, well, what's a functional medicine doctor? It's like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So can you explain what the difference
Yeah.
between traditional medicine and functional medicine is?
Yeah. Well, it's a little complicated, and I think the answer is pretty nuanced because regardless, somebody's going to get mad, because if I say functional medicine is root cause medicine, the MD is going to say, what do you think I'm doing? I'm trying to find the root cause of this problem too. So it's very hard to say that and just feel comfortable with it. But generally speaking, I think functional doctors will say my main thing is finding out why this is happening to you. If you come in, let's say, as a patient and you have symptoms, it's not about treating the symptoms. It's about why did the symptoms arise? What is the root cause behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you say, hey, Anu, I'm really constipated. Sure, I can give you a bunch of ideas like constipation is maybe you don't have enough fiber, blah, 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 or let's give you a medication. That would be just taking care of the symptom. But if I say, Kathleen, how long have you been struggling with this? What started this? And if you just say, gosh, I know I've always been constipated, then I would dig a little bit deeper into your childhood. Are you holding on to something? Was there a fear of letting go? Because there is a connection between your enteric nervous system, your brain, and a symptom like constipation. And I use constipation because so many women are constipated and they're just not even just barely touching the surface on it. So a true functional practitioner will dig deeper, perhaps do some tests, but really get to know the client or patient and understand their background before saying, this may work for you, let's try this.
Mm-hmm.
An MD or a regular practice, they don't have the time for it. It is the system that we're in. I don't blame the doctors.
Right.
Doctors have like 15 minutes with you. What are they supposed to do? Sit there and find out about your entire history? It's just not possible. It's in the system that we're blessed with today. And until and unless that changes, and the client or the patient becomes the most important thing in the conversation, and the client or the patient participates in their well-being, not just receiving some kind of a cure or whatever from the doctor, like the doctor has all the answers.
Right.
I never once assume that I have the answers. I don't. You know more about your body and you have the wisdom about your body that I'm never going to have that wisdom about you. So we become this, there's a partnership. And I think that should be the basis of every medical model. There needs to be teamwork, and that's 100% not happening today.
And we're going through this whole thing, make America healthy again, which I think is great. Let's make America healthy again. But, on the one hand, we're hearing we've got to get rid of ultra processed foods, but let's put dairy back in the school system. And it's like, those are mixed messages. And who's funding that whole campaign? But where do we even start? Because there's a lot of people that they don't have the means to pay for their medical care out of pocket. They are reliant on a system that is very broken, and they do believe that doctors have all the answers. So where do people begin, and especially women, to start taking back their health and being able to, with baby steps, make changes that would, and then I really want to get into the whole issue of the gut health and talk about how that kind of is the center, the center of the spoke of our health.
Yeah. You asked a very important question about functional medicine. And I think one of the things that maybe we start the conversation about is talking about this illness and wellness model. It's a continuum of illness and wellness. John Travis in the 70s, I think he was an an MD who shifted to functional medicine, alternative medicine, because he saw value in diet, lifestyle, and all of those things. So basically, let's say most of us are in neutral point. We're neither sick nor we're optimally well. And we kind of stay there for the most part. And then something happens, maybe cancer or really severe gut issues or things like that. And we go seeking a doctor, like I did, like you did. We go seeking a doctor. The doctor is able to either bring us back to that neutral point and help us. Sometimes they're not able to help and a patient may die, but his or her job is to bring us back to that neutral point, leave us where they found us. So anything to the right of it, of being optimally well, is on us. So empowering ourselves, and how do we do that? That is where the empowerment and of education, really not thinking of education as prescriptive, but more about, this is where I want to go. This is the next step in my health. And so education and growth and all of that will take us to optimal wellness. And optimal wellness is our birthright, but unfortunately, in the system that we're in, most of that education and understanding of our own health it falls on us. Because if not, we're going to continue being at neutral point, or we get worse.
Right.
Because with age, that is going to happen. As we get older, we get more cancers, we have cardiovascular issues. I mean, all these causes for mortality increases. So the more we pull back and say, what else can I be doing? What kind of a test should I be asking my doctor? How do I take care of my microbiome? How do I take care of my brain? How do I take care of this body? So it serves me today. It serves me 10 years from now. It serves me when I'm 90 or 100. And we're not spending the last 20 years of our life in assisted living with other people washing about. That's the sad part of American life today.
It is. I watched my mom go through the last few years of her life. She had issues around alcohol. She didn't eat healthy. And after my dad died, they were together 61 years. And it was so sad to see, the emotional pain she was in. I mean, they loved each other very much. And it was sad watching that. But then her giving up her power to the doctors, that little by little they were taking her body away. I mean, they took out guts, and it was horrendous. And it just pained me to see what she went through. And I vowed to myself, I do not want to have my end years be like that. I will do whatever I need to do, make the choices I need to make to live a healthy life. And with the gut biome and the microbiome, tell us about how the gut impacts so many different parts of our lives. And as we get older, again, I think we have to put it in very simple terms of like giving people permission to change one thing in their diet, or to take a walk today, or because I have a friend who said, well, I'm trying to exercise, and she never gets around to it because she keeps trying instead of just saying, okay, today I'm putting on the walking shoes and I'm just going to go out and walk 1 block and that's it. So let's talk about the gut and how that impacts things. And then what are some baby steps people can take?
Yeah. And you're right, because I think we all make goals, right? Like every new year, people make goals, but the goals go by the wayside because there's no systems to support it. And that's the reason I came up with the MBHR system, which is the microbiome, brain and behavior, hormones, and finally reframing your mindset. So when you take care of these components, it becomes easier to lose weight and keep it off, to stay healthy in the body, and to be metabolically healthy. All of these are important parts. So as far as gut, the microbiome, just for the listener, they're like, when you think about the gut microbiome, we have within us, and we've always had trillions of bacteria, microbes in our gut, and they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes for us. So through our evolution with them, we have handed over things like digesting fiber, fiber comes only from the plant kingdom. And fiber is that undigestible part of plant sources. Let's say you eat broccoli or you eat beans. Most of the protein and all of the other things are digested in the upper parts of your digestive system. And the only thing that goes into your colon is that fiber. And then these microbes digest the fiber. That's what they will evolve to do. And they produce some very healthy compounds for us. And why is that important for us? Because when they produce these healthy compounds, like short-chain fatty acids or butyrate, they're a mouthful, but they really help us with inflammation, cutting down blood sugar imbalance, helping us manage our weight, making sure our immune system is strong. So many things that they do because of the metabolites that they produce. They produce vitamins for us. They produce neurotransmitters like serotonin, our happy hormone. 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut. And if we don't nourish them, if we don't take care of them, there's that gut-brain connection is completely messed up. So we need to really kind of have enough of these players because you're doing so many functions for us, Kathleen. It's not one thing. They're doing so many things. Having many players, having that diversity really helps. So let's say you go to Mexico, you have Montezuma revenge, end up with diarrhea. And then you have to take antibiotics. These antibiotics can kill a lot of these bacteria, both good and bad. But if you have enough diversity, these bacteria, the bacteria that's killed does not pose a big problem for us.
Right.
Because other bacteria will come and say, hey, I'll do the job for you. That's why the diversity is important. You want to have evenness. You want to have a resilient microbiome. We're finding a place in science that we know that this is true. And the way to do that is by having a very diverse plant-based diet.
And give us an example of what a diverse plant-based diet would look like, because, for some people, they want to do it, but they really don't even know where to start.
So a diverse source is having different kinds of fibers. So why do we need fiber? Because prebiotic fibers really kind of help you make more of these bacteria. So it's really, and why do we need these bacteria? Because they're doing so much work for us. Simple, and I'm really simplifying it at this point. But if you have diverse sources, like let's say you have, you eat onions, you have leeks, artichoke, different kinds of beans and lentils, lots of greens and bitter greens, arugula, kale, mustard. All of that has just different kinds of fibers. And when you increase that diversity, then the microbes are happy because it is your source of fuel. So as far as people who are maybe plant-based, meaning that the majority of their food comes from plant sources, but they do eat some animal protein. If you do have listeners who do both, then I would say as long as you're eating plant-based sources, then that the animal protein does not become an issue. Because what happens when you eat, let's say you have some chicken, but with a huge big salad or something like that. You eat it, and then this, most of the chicken needs to be digested in the upper parts of your digestive system. But if you eat a lot of animal protein, or if you eat animal protein, but you're not digesting it, it hits the colon, and these bacteria are not used to digesting protein. They evolved, as I said, to digest fiber. But there are lots of pathogenic bacteria who do digest the protein. But what happens is the metabolites that they produce because of that can be toxic to us.
Right.
It can produce things like ammonia or hydrogen sulfide that makes you gassy, and the gas could be smelly, things like that.
Right.
So having that diversity and protecting your microbiome is I think it's very crucial.
So With the gut, how connected is that to the brain? Because I know that now dementia is becoming more and more of an issue with people at younger ages, and there's several different types. But how connected is what we eat to what's going on in the brain?
So the gut and brain are connected. In fact, the
Okay.
gut is called the second brain. We
Mhm.
always say, I had a gut feeling. And that's just not just a saying, it's really happening. We do have the enteric nervous system, or the gut is the second brain. There's a lot more messaging going from the gut to the brain than the other way around. And this bidirectional conversation is happening through the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve. And so that's the reason keeping your vagus nerve that meanders all the way into your digestive system nice and healthy. So how do we do that? Singing, humming, breath work, gargling. Like this morning, I gargle like nobody's business. My husband always says, you're gonna get our neighbors really upset, because I just gargle and I sing and I try to hum, all
Right.
of this to get the vagus nerve, nice and healthy. So that bidirectional conversation is happening. The gut is producing all of these, neurotransmitters like GABA, which keeps us really calm, serotonin, which keeps us happy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And is it any wonder that more and more people are having anxiety and mental issues and things like that because of food? If you're not eating a diverse diet, these species are dying on us. Though these serotonin producing species are dying on us, and we have to resort to medication to fix our brain.
It's scary when you think of, what is happening to people just as a whole of like when I go to the grocery store and I see the amount of obesity, and I'm not making a judgment call because I was on my way to being there when I was not eating healthy. I don't drink any alcohol, haven't had a drink in 43 years. I don't smoke. I used to
Wonderful
be
to
quite a
hear.
smoker. Yeah, I mean, I've made some very conscious lifestyle choices, but I look at like children, for example, and I believe in your book you mentioned about ADHD, and how how much does the food that we eat impact, or I should say, the food children eat, or they're being subjected to eat because their parents, for some, they don't know. They really do not know. And we say just feed your kids healthy, and they look at the box on the shelf and it says healthy meal. And it's like, no, 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 that's not healthy. How prevalent is ADHD based on what a young person is eating?
Yeah, I think it all starts with the family. I think it starts with mom, dad. What kind of messages are we
Hmm.
sending our children? If you're telling your child, eat your broccoli, I'll give you some candy, that's not a conversation
Right.
that is responsible because, basically you believe that the broccoli is the punishment and you're undergoing that punishment to get a reward, which is candy. So the first thing we need to do is stop thinking of food as and I don't blame the parents. This is so inculcated in our culture. We've always felt like dessert is like an everyday thing, that we should be having candy every day and chocolates every day. There are so many cultures, Kathleen, where dessert is like once a week. Like in
Right.
Sweden, they have like Saturdays for candy.
Hmm.
Many cultures that don't really have something sweet every single day. But here we're eating candies and donuts and Twinkies and things like that. Instead, I'll give you an example. I had a client who came to me and I did pro bono work for her because she couldn't afford to work with me, and I just saw this incredible thirst for knowledge
Right.
and how much she wanted to set things right for her family. I said, listen, if you're able to get your children the health that they deserve, that our medical system is not giving us, I'm happy to work pro bono. that was my intention, right? That she's able to pass it on to her kids, because our generation, the next generation matters, because you're passing on your microbiome like a family heirloom to the next generation. So she agreed, and oh my gosh, she's been one of my best clients, because not only she took this as with such gratitude, and she never took me for granted because I gave something to her,
Right.
And so every conversation was, how do we feed your children? What kind of thing? So within about 2 weeks, she realized that she was spending so much money on packaged processed goods. So when she stopped doing that, and I said, let's compare, and let's look at the money that you're spending on these things, and let's go to the same place, be Walmart or whatever, and just see if you did buy the broccoli, if you did buy like some pasta with tomato sauce and with some protein, would that change? Would you be spending more? And she came back totally surprised. She said, oh my gosh, I'm spending less and less on grocery, because
Right.
I go in knowing that, one, I don't shop, I just shop the perimeter. I just know that I'm buying whole foods. I'm not buying any of this crap. My children are getting used to it. They're acting out less and less. So all in all, she realized the power of eating whole foods.
Right. You really hit on something that I think if people would actually log what foods they buy, what the cost is, because, for example, potato chips, you buy a bag of potato chips, I am shocked at the price. Occasionally I'll go down the aisles just to see, oh God, I'm glad I don't eat that. But it's like, I think a bag of potato chips now is like $6 or something.
Yes.
What I love to do is I like to slice fresh potatoes and I put it in my air fryer. I make those into potato chips and I dip it in hummus, and it's like, or salsa. It's like, what a treat. And no salt, no nothing. It's like just a healthy, very nourishing meal and snack for me. But because I used to be one of those, I had a ferret at one point that he would bust me. He'd go into I was working a corporate job at the time, and I was gaining a lot of weight at that time. I've been one of those up and down until I went plant-based and really stuck on the straight and narrow. But he would go in my briefcase and he would pull out candy wrappers. And it's like, oh, you little poop, you. And, so animals will tell us a lot.
They tell us a lot. But what you said about potatoes, that's a good starting point. Everybody eats potatoes, right? And potatoes not this evil thing, or
Right.
oh, you're going to gain weight. What if you take the same potato and you boil it, you cool it, stick it in the refrigerator for about 6 hours. The next day, you can eat it in a salad, you can air fry it, do what you need to. What happens is you end up getting a lot of resistant starch. The chemical structure of the potato changes, and you don't extract as many calories from it.
Right.
And it's also serving as a source of fiber to your microbiome. And again, taking that same potato and saying, okay, I'm having red potatoes today, I'm having purple potatoes today, I'm having sweet potatoes today.
Right.
That changing, that's what increases diversity. This does not have to be complicated. And certainly being busy with the book and everything, it's just, that's how I simplify my life.
Right.
The night before, I say, what does my gut want? What do my microbes want? And I've enlisted my husband's help in this. I say, honey, every night, soak the beans for me. And he'll ask the question, I wonder what they might like tomorrow. I've extended that conversation to him.
Oh, that's great.
So he will do these, like pinto beans, black beans, lentils, and whatever shows up, that's what I cook up the next day.
Nice.
We'll have like 3 or 4 different veggies, one starchy, like a sweet potato or something like that. And it's enough. That's plenty. You don't have to
love it.
Things.
Now, tell us about your book and where people can find it. And then I want to talk about the Flourish Diet, which is in the book. So tell us about your book and how can people find it?
Okay, well, it's going to be out end of this month or the first week. My publishers promised to me, and it's going to be available where all books are sold, and it's also on my website. And my website is 9armsofwellness.com. And my Instagram is also 9 Arms of Wellness, and 9 Arms of Wellness is my philosophy and my business. Yeah, that's.
And the book is Flourish from Within.
Yeah,
it's
all Flourish from Within, and it's all, the first part of the book is all about the microbiome.
Right.
I've tried to keep the science very simple for the layperson to understand, because 2 out of 3 Americans do not know the word microbiome, and I'm on a mission to change that. I really want people to understand the value of taking care of these forever guests. And section 2 is the Flourish Diet, as you mentioned, and section 3 is just simple recipes. And for me, it was really important to honor different cultures, so they don't really especially come from any particular culture. It's just a hodgepodge mix of different cultures. And I also want to point out that every culture has incredibly nourishing foods. We just have to find it. Like, I work with a lot of African Americans, and they bring their grandmother's recipes and we change it up. Collard greens without the ham could be a beautiful soup.
You could put tofu in there. I mean, I switch out. We had lettuce wraps the other day, and one group of people, they had to have their hamburger, and I did mine with tofu. And I said, just try it, just try it with the tofu. And they tried it, and they were like, tastes the same. I said, it's what we're putting on it that makes a difference, But
tofu is one of those blank canvases that kind of absorbs
absolutely.
Everything. You have to know how to cook it, though.
You do, and it took me a little bit, but I do the firm and the extra firm depending on what I'm cooking. But tell us about the Flourish Diet and where you came up with the whole concept for that, and how it will benefit, especially women as they get older.
Yeah. Prior to writing the book, I spent about 2 to 3 years on research. I did a lot of research on the microbiome. And the one thing that came out of it was the majority of the research was pointing towards these blue zones, towards Mediterranean diets, and also the importance of fiber, fermented foods, and things like that. So right off the bat, I knew that that's what the diet had to be. But I also wanted to, I'm very uncomfortable with labels. And I'll tell you why. I consider myself vegan. I do it for my health, and I do it also for animals and for the planet. But I'm also very considerate and compassionate of people who were trying, but maybe every day trying, but maybe not. So it's not really about perfection. It's about the intention of living a better life, say, whatever it is, for animals or health or whatever, right? So keeping that in mind, I said, I don't want to be attached to a label. Instead, I want to use the science to come up with a diet that anybody can use. Even if they're carnivores, I mean, not carnivores, but even if they are, omnivores or pescatarians, or anybody can use this diet, because the diet is not saying you need to eat these macros, meaning protein, carbohydrates, or fats. It's saying, listen, eat the protein of your choice, but this is how you feed your microbes. And that is through the Flourish Diet. And we have foundational layers. You have to start with your veggies and fruits. Have a copious amount of that. Enhancers are things like good fats, herbs and spices, things like that really are high in antioxidants. And finally, some functional foods. When I say functional foods, I mean these prebiotic fibers like beta-glucans, fructooligosaccharides, galactooligosaccharides. I know they're all a mouthful, but they're all part of this plant foods that everyone should know about and revere and be thankful to, because your oats and your beans and your legumes, and they come with such rich sources of these gauze foods, like that that's the reason you feel less satiety when you eat a bean food. You feel full. Because you feel, because of the fiber content in it. So that was important to me. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned fermenting. Okay, one of the things I know to be true, and in some ways I'm a baby vegan. I've been, since 2018, so it's not been a long time, but compared to others, it is long. But I know vegans that have been vegan since birth. I mean, literally since birth, and plant-based. And what I know to be true is you start at one level of knowledge. And for me, it was just I wanted to get rid of inflammation. The deeper I went into it, that's when I realized, oh, what they do to the animals and all that. But then moving into different aspects of balancing the plate, the proteins, where you get the most protein from beans, legumes, lentils, things of that nature. And we go deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm at the fork in the road with fermented foods. How do I find them? How do I ferment my own stuff? Because I know that, like, I've looked at
That's
the
one of the
little
reasons
kits.
I didn't go into detail with the fermented foods in my
Okay,
book, because I realized that the basic reader was this was enough. It was
right.
exhausting.
It's
Just
a
get
lot. Your book is like seriously 10 in one. I got to tell you, when it comes out, people, you need to get the book. Yeah.
yeah. So I thought, well, I do need to, I would like to teach people about fermented foods, but that needs to be the second step.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to have classes and things around the book so people understand how to live this in a very simple way. But
Right.
fermented foods, like Kathleen, let's say you want to start eating fermented foods tomorrow, go slow, because we don't know how, because all of a sudden you're bombarding your body with a lot of microbes, live microbes, that we don't know how your body is going to address that,
Right.
right? What kind of a relationship it's going to have with these microbes. So always start small when you're starting a new fermented food. I would say, like sauerkraut, for example, is benign, it's easy, it doesn't have a lot of taste. Let's say compare that to kimchi. I mean, it has all of these strong tastes that for the average person, it's a bit much.
Right.
So start with something like sauerkraut, go in, make sure that you're getting the live, not the pasteurized kind of fermented foods. You can get it everywhere now, including like Target and Walmart. I've actually shopped there, and I was really surprised that you could actually find the same product cheaper in some of these other locations. You can get that. You can get live microbes from a yogurt, a coconut yogurt. But the important thing is to look for strains. If it says probiotic cultures, for example, don't waste your money on it.
Okay.
You need to be very clear what kind of strains the product has. If it says, oh, this product contains lactobacillus reuteri or BB lactis 12, then you know that it has a very specific strain that's going to be of service to you. So that's one way to do it. Kombucha is another. It's a great way of adding things. Kefir is another healthy food. I add all of these things, coconut kefir and things like that, into my smoothies. Again, like I said,
I want to talk about smoothies. So let's make
yeah.
sure to put a bow on that, because I want to. I
And
want to.
I would like to talk about protein, because I think this is something that divides us as when you think about labels. And even just for plant-based eaters who've been plant-based for a very long time, I think this is important information, and I'd love to share that. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's you do a daily smoothie, because I do one in the morning and I put
Yeah,
plant protein in there.
I do this for my clients as well. I say, listen, we don't know how the rest of your day is going to fly. You may have work meetings, you may just skip dinner. We don't know. But if you have a good foundation for your morning breakfast, and that is, and if you're having trouble digesting a lot of things, a smoothie does that for you. It digests everything for you in the blender, and it has all the fiber. Compare that to, let's say, a juice like celery juice. It's all the fiber is taken out of it, and
Right.
it's just juice. So when you compare these two things, the smoothie is way healthier. It
Mm-hmm.
has the fiber. You're adding some protein powder. So really add the protein powder of your choice. There's so many things available right now. Pea protein, ham, rice, mix it up and have about 30 to 35 grams of protein in it. Have some fruits, have some veggies in it, like greens and things like that. it's going to keep you so full
Absolutely.
that, one of the biggest things with plant-based eaters that we're always hungry. We digest our food so quickly. And one of the reasons is if that's happening to a listener, they're really hungry, they're eating something, and they try to eat again in a couple of hours. That means that they're not getting enough protein and they're not getting enough fiber. So the way to do both is to start your day with a smoothie. Or have a big proper lunch for breakfast, quinoa, edamame, tofu, and things like that. Just make sure you're getting about 35 grams of protein, because then you're getting enough of the amino acid leucine. Leucine is really important for muscle synthesis. And a lot of us as plant-based eaters kind of skip on that. Even just other people do too. So getting about 2.5 grams of leucine is very important to start building muscle and to keep you healthy.
How do we get that? What foods are it in, or is that a supplement?
No, it's not a supplement. Well, you could get a supplement, I suppose, but I get everything from my plant-based foods.
Okay.
So like I will have, let's say, for example, this morning I had pomegranate juice. I had maybe 2 scoops of protein powder. Then I had like a small, silken tofu. And I had some riced cauliflower and some blueberries in it for antioxidants. Mixed it all up, had a proper smoothie. And what's the time now? Almost 2 o'clock, and I'm still not hungry.
Okay. Well, and I started with a plant protein smoothie, and mine, I need to add some greens to it because I've been doing it mostly with the hemp hearts, chia seeds, flax seeds, creatine, as some people call it. I'm trying to think, turmeric, black pepper, banana, and then the protein powder.
Yeah.
And I use water. I don't.
And do you have like fresh banana, or is it frozen?
Fresh.
Okay.
Should I do frozen?
Maybe try, yes. I mean, from the microbial perspective.
Okay,
frozen.
Doc, help me out here. No, this is great. This is great.
It's just that if you have like fresh banana, I mean, I don't know if some of our listeners are insulin resistant, and banana is high in glycemic index, so it can up your blood sugar. So instead, let's freeze it, increase the resistance starch, and then drop it into our smoothie.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the reason you're eating banana is because, one, it's sweet and it gives that consistency to
I like the thickness.
Yeah, the thickness. So regardless, you're going to get that in some.
Well, I have the good fortune of having a neighbor who she did a garden this year, and she always has an overflow of kale, of baby lettuce, of radishes, of herbs. And it's every Saturday she brings me a basket. I mean, it's
just like that, when you said radish and, just combining your foods, let's say you're having a cabbage coleslaw.
Okay.
Adding that radish in will increase its medicinal compounds.
Okay. Okay. So let's shift over a little to talk about exercise. How important is exercise in the protocol when you work with your clients?
If someone's coming to me for weight loss, that's not the first thing we take care of. They're already so tired and depleted, and they don't have the energy to exercise. And just changing food is such a monumental thing. We start with food. And then when they've dropped about 20, 25 pounds, I usually ask them, are you ready to bring some form of movement into your life? And usually they say yes. And it can be very simple things like walking.
Right.
Walking is a cortisol buster. You can start with walking every day and start with 5,000 steps, increase it to where you feel comfortable. And when you're really, really good at that, take it to the next step and carry some weights with it. So there are many things just with walking that we can do. As we're getting older into perimenopause and menopause, strength training is very important. So lifting that weight, lifting some, and doing it a few times a week is, I think, is really important. And that's where your creatine is really important too, for muscle recovery. You're going to feel so much better, and cognitive health. I'm not a big fan of telling people what kind of supplements to take, because it is so bio-individual. Because, you could have let's say you wear glasses, you may need something completely different. You may be diabetic, you may need something different. But I feel so comfortable with saying everyone should at least give creatine a try.
How many grams do you recommend? Because depending on whether yesterday I did a 2-hour workout, but that included indoor track, that included some yoga and stretching, that included stomach exercises, and then I did back and buys and shoulders yesterday. So I break up my body parts, but
I don't think we have research for that, Kathleen. We have research to say that everyone should have about 5 grams.
Okay.
And then let's say you're a vegan and you don't have animal sources of protein, then you could front load it, meaning you could just take maybe 1 week to maybe have protein in the morning and in the evening, really up that level. The research is kind of all over the place with that. Some people see the benefit of front loading, especially when they've been low on protein, and others, eventually your body just has enough sense to make it right.
Right.
I don't do that. I just very systematically take creatine every day.
I have it right on my counter. It's like I know
that. They say there's some benefit to taking it post-workout.
Okay. I put it in my water bottle, and I take that to the gym and I sip on it while I'm working out, but I have my 5 grams first thing in the morning.
I'm trying to drink it all up within that 60 minutes is very important because it does break down.
Good to know. So, okay. Well, is there anything that I haven't covered that you really wanted to make sure people knew?
No, I mean, I just feel like I do believe that you can be plant-based and you could be very healthy, and you can also be plant-based and unhealthy. So you could be inflamed. So it's not about labels. It's about if you're really doing it for health, then do it for health initially. But if you're doing it for ethical reasons, then and health is not a big. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but I feel like everyone should be first taking care of themselves. I do believe that. And I think as vegans, we all need to be more compassionate of people who are trying. And I sometimes feel like that's a little lost, because when you think about nonviolence or ahimsa, it really starts with our fellow human beings as well. So I kind of believe that. And that's the reason I don't send anyone away if they're saying, oh, I can't go vegan or plant-based. It just feels a little too rigid for me. And I welcome everyone where they are as their starting point, and then and really help them understand the value of eating plants.
Absolutely.
That's my big message. Eat as many plants.
I have gotten to that point because initially when I first discovered, just like when I discovered not drinking, it was like everybody should quit drinking. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Just because I had a problem with it didn't mean other people did. But with the food, when I first went plant-based, it was like everybody should, don't you see? And no, they don't. And now when people, they'll ask me something and I'll say, well, I don't consume animal or dairy. And they go, oh, I could never do that. And I said, that's okay. It's like, if what you're doing works for you, great. If it doesn't, there are answers. So I think I've gotten more compassionate as I've gone along, and tomorrow I might have a different answer. But this has been delightful. Anu, this has been really, really delightful. And again, your book is Flourish from Within. And I encourage people, when it's published, definitely get your book. And I hope your book does as well as Dr. B's book on fiber fuel. Boy, his just took off.
He's been an amazing wealth of information for everybody. Yeah.
Yes. And, there's so much healing that needs to take place. And every book that goes out there that helps people to be on a healthier path, it's like I just bless that book, and I wish you the greatest success. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. And you've been listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage, and I encourage you, do your research and do what you need to do to live the healthiest life possible in mind, body, and soul. Have a great day. You've been listening to the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. I'm your host, Kathleen Gage, inviting you to subscribe to this channel wherever you're listening or watching the show. And please let your friends know about the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. Live healthy.